Close your eyes and picture a fire truck. I bet it's red, right? I mean, that bright, bold FireEngine Red is just burned into our brains. But here's the thing. The story behind why it's that color, it's way more interesting and honestly, way more complicated than you probably think.
Yeah, it seems like such a simple question, doesn't it? Why are fire trucks red? Obvious answer, so you can see them. But if that was all there was to it, we could just end this right now. The real answer, it's so much deeper than that. See, what we're really talking about here is a huge battle. It's a clash between, on one side, more than a century of tradition and pure symbolism, and on the other side, cold, hard science about how our eyes actually work. What we can really see when our lives might depend on it.
All right, so to really get why red is still the king, we've got to rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning, to a time when that red paint job wasn't just about color, it was a full-on statement.
The funny thing is, the story doesn't even start with the trucks. It starts with the firefighters. Way back in the 1840s, volunteer squads started wearing these bright red flannel shirts. It was their uniform, sure, but it was more than that. It was a symbol of their pride, their bravery. So naturally, when the first motorized engines rolled onto the scene, slapping that same iconic red on them just made sense.
And look, there was a super practical reason for it too. Think about the early 1900s. You've got Henry Ford famously saying, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. So imagine a world where every single car on the road is black. A screaming red engine coming down the street? Yeah, you were going to see that. It was basically the original high-viz color.
Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting, because a couple of myths popped up around this whole thing. You'll hear two totally different stories. One version goes that red paint was the cheapest stuff you could buy. So volunteer departments trying to save a buck just used that. Then there's the other theory, which says the complete opposite, that red was actually one of the most expensive colors out there.
And it turns out the history books lean towards that second theory. Choosing that pricey red paint, that was a massive point of pride. It was a way of saying, hey, we're professionals here. We take this seriously, and we'll spend what it takes to protect our town. So pretty quickly, red became more than just paint on a truck. It got woven right into the DNA of the fire service. So, for decades, nobody even questioned it. Red meant fire truck. End of story. But then science showed up to the party and started asking some pretty awkward questions. The question was this: just because red was great against a bunch of black cars in 1920, is it actually the safest color? Like for our eyes, is it the most visible, especially at night or in a rainstorm? And the answer from science? A big, fat nope.
And it all boils down to this really cool thing our eyes do called the Purkinje shift. Here's the deal. As it gets dark, our eyes basically switch modes. They go from using our cone cells, which see color, to using our rod cells, which are amazing in low light but terrible with color. And during that switch, our eyes become way more sensitive to colors like green and yellow, and, you guessed it, way less sensitive to colors with long wavelengths, like red.
So, get this. The very color we picked to be super visible is actually one of the first to basically disappear and look black as the sun goes down. Just let that sink in for a second. The emergency vehicle that needs to be seen the most is hardest to see at night. This isn't just some lab experiment either. It has huge real-world consequences.
So in the 1990s, an optometrist named Stephen Solomon and his partner James King decided to put this whole theory to the test. They ran this huge 4-year study down in Dallas, and they directly compared the accident rates of the classic red fire trucks to trucks painted this bright, almost fluorescent lime yellow. And what they found was absolutely stunning. It turns out the red fire trucks were getting into visibility-related accidents 3 times more often than the lime yellow ones. Not 10% more, not 50% more, 300% more. That is a massive, massive difference in safety.
I mean, just look at the data from their study. It's not even close. The number of accidents for red trucks just dwarfs the number for the lime yellow ones. As far as the science was concerned, the case was closed. If you want to be seen, especially when things get hairy, lime yellow is just hands down safer.
Okay, so with that kind of damning evidence, you'd think every fire department in America would have repainted their fleets lime yellow the next day, right? Yeah, not so much. That's not what happened at all, because the story took another twist, all thanks to technology.
Even with all that data, tradition is an incredibly powerful thing. To this day, fire truck manufacturers will tell you that something like 95% of new trucks are still ordered in red. So why is that? Well, it's what we, the public, expect to see. And for the firefighters themselves, that red color is a huge part of who they are.
This whole situation forced a change in how people thought about the problem. A big report came out in 2009 from the U.S. Fire Administration, and it made a really interesting point. It said, yeah, visibility is crucial, but so is instant recognizability. Think about it. A driver might see a lime yellow truck and wonder, what is that? But everyone, and I mean everyone, knows that a big red truck with flashing lights is a fire truck, and you need to get out of the way. Now.
And that brings us to the modern compromise. The thinking now is that safety isn't just about the paint job anymore. The focus has moved to something called a total system of conspicuity. That's a fancy way of saying they use a whole bunch of different technologies together to make that truck absolutely impossible to miss, whether it's day or night, and no matter what color it's painted.
So what's in that system? Well, you've got these huge reflective stripes. You'll often hear them called Battenberg markings that just explode with light when your headlights hit them. Then you have fluorescent materials that pop during the day. And of course, you've got those ridiculously bright LED light bars that can probably be seen from space. You put all that together, and that truck becomes hyper-visible. So, where are we now? Well, the debate has kind of moved on. It's not really a simple red versus yellow fight anymore. It's much more about finding the smartest way to blend that powerful, 100-year-old tradition with the very best of modern safety science.
If you boil it all down, it's pretty simple. Red has tradition and the fact that we all know what it is on its side. Lime yellow has the pure science of visibility, especially in the dark. For a long time, it felt like fire departments had to pick a side.
But today's answer is a lot smarter than that. It's all about finding a balance. A fire department can hold on to that iconic red color that means so much to them, and at the same time, they can load it up with all that modern tech to completely cancel out red's natural weaknesses.
So here is the bottom line. The classic red fire truck isn't going away. It's not being replaced by science, it's actually being upgraded by it. It's a fantastic example of how a deep-rooted tradition can adapt and evolve, right? It keeps all of its history and its meaning, but it also embraces new technology to become safer than it has ever been.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to chew on. This whole story about the red fire truck, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other obvious things in our everyday lives are the way they are just because they've always been that way? Even when science is screaming that there's a better, safer, or just plain smarter way to do it.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more How Meets History.